This is your final call. Thank you. If you'll take your seats, we'll try and begin. Thank you so much.
Please welcome to the stage Chancellor of Queen's University, Hilary Rodman Clinton.
Thank you. Thank you all so very much. And it is a great honor to be joined here today by Prime Minister Sunak and Taoiseach Varadkar and Vice Chancellor Greer, along with Bill Clinton. I want to thank everyone for the last extraordinary days of events, and especially to the students, professors, and administrators here at Queen's whose hard work made this conference such a success. Yes, let's give them all a round of applause. As you know, because this hall has been filled and so many have been watching on live stream, I've heard from people literally from the United States to Singapore. We've heard from the architects of the Good Friday Agreement about the challenges they encountered and the solutions they built. We've had a chance to reflect on what has been achieved and to really honor all of the citizens of Northern Ireland who made the peace possible. We also recognize the impact of those who often go unrecognized, the many women of Northern Ireland who were crucial to the agreement's inception and its longevity. And on the second day, we discussed how to renew the commitment to peace and prosperity that was committed to 25 years ago. And now, on this last day, the work to reimagine the future of Northern Ireland is front and center. I just came from the very first shared campus in Northern Ireland at an incredible setting in Limavady, where the St. Mary's Catholic High School and the local high school are working together, where Catholic and Protestant principals, teachers, and students are learning side by side, playing sports, sharing ideas, and building that shared community that we all hope to see across the deep divides. I also was just stunned, because I've been to hundreds of high schools in the course of many years, that at the STEM school that is the center of the shared learning experience, largely as a result of the commitment and support of Queen's University to make it happen, I saw students literally building an airplane. I thought that showed the kind of commitment and imagination that we want to see across Northern Ireland. So I want to thank you all for being here and for your sustained commitment to the Good Friday Agreement. With that in mind, it is now my great pleasure to introduce our next speakers, both of whom have been strong advocates for democratic cooperation under the agreement. Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, is the first woman to hold that position, and she has spent her career advocating for women's rights, public health, peace, and so much more. Charles Michel, President of the European Council, has shepherded the EU through regional conflicts, a global pandemic, and a very rapidly changing geopolitical landscape. It is now my pleasure to invite President Michel to the stage.
Dear Secretary Clinton, dear Prime Minister Sunak, dear Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, dear President von der Leyen, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Brother Roger of Taizé, a Christian leader who devoted his life to reconciling different Christian denominations, once said, "Strength and courage is when someone can shake hands and listen to the other, despite past divisions." It was precisely this strength and courage 25 years ago that led to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, a remarkable and rare achievement that largely ended 3 decades of fighting in Northern Ireland, especially rare when we look at the arc of human history, full of unsolved conflicts that continue to divide peoples, leading to entrenched suffering generation after generation. Yet right here in Northern Ireland, against all odds, a peace deal was reached and a new hope took root that day. It was not the end of the journey, but it was a new beginning, ending armed conflict and securing the rights of all people in Northern Ireland. And that's why we come together today to mark this anniversary of this historic deal. It's our duty to keep the spirit of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement alive, just as it was born 25 years ago. We pay tribute, first and foremost, to the people of this land, the countless unsung heroes. Yes, I call them heroes, the visionaries who imagined a society reconciled with the past and able to look to the future, a future forged in peace, free from violence. All the people of this land willing to embark on a journey towards reconciliation. The politicians, the treaties, the agreements, they are all crucial to the process. But it's the will of the people that's the steely backbone, the vision for what Northern Ireland can be. Thousands of unnamed people over many years worked to unlock this agreement in politics, public life, religion, civil society. The full story of this peace agreement cannot be told without acknowledging their brave contributions. Without the will of the people, the Good Friday Agreement would be just another paper in the Museum of Failed Peace Deals. And I'd like to pay a particular tribute to the women of Northern Ireland, like Betty Williams and Maureen Maguire. And of course, we can never forget the enormous contributions of the visionary leaders like John Hume, David Trimble, Bertie Ahern, Tony Blair, Bill Clinton, George Mitchell, and so many others. Their efforts, your efforts, ensured that the people's will did not fall on barren ground. So today, we must protect the gains of this agreement and stay true to its principles of peace, respect, tolerance, because this is the best way to knit together a society that's stronger and more united on a land that's shared together. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, in the European Union, we also know the importance of the strong backing of our citizens. Without the support of the citizens, our union would not have seen the light of day. Enemies who once fought each other on European soil agreed and decided to create shared institutions on that very same soil, to work together, to build trust and mutual understanding on a path towards reconciliation. When the UK and Ireland joined the EU together in 1973, they subscribed to this common vision. And over the decades, the contacts between British, Irish, and EU officials at all levels helped to cement mutual trust and understanding. European projects, one could say, helped to prepare the ground for the seed of peace to take root in Northern Ireland. It focused on improving the daily lives of people, on building alliances, not on identity and politics. It focused on practical issues like agriculture, transport, economic cooperation, but also rule of law and citizens' rights. Our goal was to foster our diverse identities while still uniting around these differences, and to build a strong single market, not to erase borders, but to make them less divisive, less important, less burdensome. We also know that transforming a vision into reality doesn't happen overnight. It requires a lot of hard work. Reconciliation, trust, and cooperation are not the work of hours and days, but months, years, and decades. And it takes willingness to compromise, to step across divides and to take risks. In Europe, we do not pretend to have all the answers, but we strive to provide a space to come together and to work together on a common vision for our common destiny. In this same spirit, the EU was quick to respond after the first ceasefires in Northern Ireland in 1994. The European Commission, President Jacques Delors, simply asked, what can the EU do to help build lasting peace? And this led to the creation of the EU peace programs, which have helped to foster peace and reconciliation between communities since 1995. The EU has also contributed to a range of infrastructure projects, like, for instance, developing the successful waterfront area here in Belfast, and many social projects, including those aimed at victims of the troubles on both sides of the Irish border. Ladies and gentlemen, in the EU, we remain fully committed to fostering peace and reconciliation in Northern Ireland. It's no secret that the United Kingdom's sovereign decision to leave the EU posed serious new challenges. For instance, the complexities at the border. For the EU, our main goal has always been to make sure that Brexit does not undermine the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, and that it does not resurrect the borders and the divisions of the past. And that's why we've always worked to build trust, to find collective and, at times, imaginative solutions, and to move forward in a way that listens to and respects the communities in Northern Ireland. The recently agreed Windsor Framework does precisely that. It provides a good opportunity to build a more positive and stable relationship between the EU and the UK, to work better together, to build trust together, anchored in our shared interest and our common fundamental values. I think it will provide greater certainty and predictability for the people and businesses in Northern Ireland. It is you, the people of this fine land, that must decide your future together. This is the only way to build a stable and prosperous future. Ladies and gentlemen, your country has changed beyond recognition over the last quarter of a century. Today, you have peace in Northern Ireland, and you have something more, something that can only be achieved through peace. You have greater prosperity. And for this reason, it has become a model for solving other entrenched conflicts across the world, some of them in Europe. The Belfast Agreement also represents the product and the high point of another era, an era when the values of liberal democracies were preeminent in the world. In the past 25 years, the world has changed dramatically. The September 11th attacks, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the global economic crisis, the climate emergency, COVID-19, and now Russia's war against Ukraine, where we see the tragic consequences of war. In these turbulent times, two great allies, like the United Kingdom and the European Union, we need each other more than ever. We stand together. We stand together to tackle common challenges like climate change. We stand together to uphold human dignity and human rights. In this increasingly dangerous world, Northern Ireland and the Belfast Good Friday Agreement are a powerful symbol of what our shared values can achieve. Let's continue to build on this unstoppable belief in the potential of peace, for more freedom, more prosperity, more democracy for the people of Northern Ireland and for all people across the world. I thank you.
Please welcome to the stage President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
Prime Minister Taoiseach, Chancellor Clinton, President Michel, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Allow me, first of all, to thank Queen's University of Belfast and you, Secretary Clinton, for this incredible event. It is an opportunity to thank and praise the architects of the Good Friday Belfast Agreement, but also to look at our friendship between the United Kingdom and the European Union, and most importantly, to look at the future of peace in Northern Ireland. Allow me to begin with a personal memory. In my 20s, I studied in London. I fell in love with this vibrant and vital city, colorful and cosmopolitan. It was in the late 1970s, and a few years earlier, the women's peace movement in Northern Ireland had won the Nobel Peace Prize. But the hope, inspired by that recognition, had largely ebbed away. So during my time in London, when I heard about Northern Ireland in the news, it was a story of conflict, of bombs and violence in the streets. Today, my children are in their 20s, and they have learned a completely different story, a story of reconciliation and hope, a story of economic and social progress. For young Europeans, Northern Ireland is today a cool place. It's a place of music, film sets, and stunning landscapes. This brighter reality is only possible because on Good Friday, 25 years ago, the leaders and the people of Northern Ireland decided to plant a seed in soil previously stained with blood and tears. And it is the seed of peace and possibility for new generations, which has been growing defiantly ever since. Today we pay tribute to all those who planted that seed. We thank the visionary leaders of all communities in Northern Ireland, the United Kingdom, and Ireland, who believed that while history shapes people, people can also shape history. And this is what happened ever since. The people of Northern Ireland have shaped a new history. Of course, decades of troubles are impossible to forget. The past cannot be rewritten. But writing a new present and future is always a possibility. And that is exactly what the people of Northern Ireland have decided to focus on. Being the master of your destiny. It is in this mindset that my first meeting with Prime Minister Sunak took place. It was at the United Nations Climate Conference in Egypt at the end of last year. And since that first meeting, we agreed to focus on the road ahead more than on past disagreements. Because the challenges ahead of us are daunting. For the first time in decades, large-scale war is back in Europe. The foundations of peaceful coexistence in our continent have come under attack. And this concerns all Europeans, not only Russia's closest neighbors. The European Union and the United Kingdom are in this together. We both want to uphold Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We both want Russia's aggression to fail, and we both want to restore a just peace in Europe. We still see the world with the same eyes. We still share the same values and sense of purpose. We still believe that peace is precious and can never be taken for granted. And I'm particularly grateful to our British friends, not only for their unwavering support for Ukraine and European security, but also for the determination, on that occasion and ever since, to overcome our differences and find workable solutions to the challenges that arose after Brexit. The Windsor Framework is a new beginning for old friends. It turns the page on years of division and dispute. It is an opportunity to set our sights on the future of our partnership and to focus on what brings us together. As President Biden said last week, the dividends of peace are all around us. Northern Ireland's GDP has more than doubled since 1998 and could increase by a further 50% over the next decade. New private investments are driving activities like fintech and cybersecurity. And more investors are now eyeing at Northern Ireland. This is a unique opportunity for Northern Ireland. There is so much we can do together with wisdom and vision. The same wisdom and vision that the leaders of Northern Ireland have already shown over the past 25 years. There are so many that deserve special recognition, like John Hume and David Tremble, who were key to reaching an agreement. Allow me to refer to one example, to someone who 25 years ago did not agree with the text of the Good Friday Belfast Agreement. I'm talking about the Reverend Ian Paisley. Yet, less than 10 years after that Good Friday, Ian Paisley became Northern Ireland's First Minister, working under the St Andrews power-sharing structures and working with a Deputy First Minister, Martin McGuinness, who used to be one of his staunchest foes. This is one of the miracles of the Good Friday Belfast Agreement. And the journey of Ian Paisley mirrors the journey of thousands of people on this island. History now calls on today's leaders to embark on a similar path and to shape together the future of Northern Ireland. Ladies and gentlemen, the future of Northern Ireland belongs to its people. Only you can make the seed of the Good Friday Belfast Agreement continue to grow and to flourish. Only you can take the next step on the path of prosperity and possibility. And let me borrow the words of a woman from Northern Ireland called Anne Patterson. She gave birth to a baby girl just minutes after the Good Friday Belfast Agreement was signed. And with her husband, she decided to call the baby Hope. And today, she says, and I quote, "Peace is a process, not an event. Everybody is responsible, and change begins with yourself." End of quote. She is so right. I can reassure you that we, the European Union, will continue to do our part and to accompany you on the path of peace and prosperity. Today, my grandchildren are toddlers. What Northern Ireland and the whole island of Ireland will look like when they are in their 20s depends on all of us. But the ultimate choice lies with you, the people of Northern Ireland, to shape your history and that of the next generation. The gateway to a bright future is open. All you need to do is walk through it. Thank you very much.
Please welcome to the stage the 42nd President of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have been here so long that I am reliably informed that I will owe taxes if I'm not gone in 48 hours. Mr. Prime Minister Taoiseach, I got to hear President von der Leyen, all distinguished guests, and thank you, Bertie Ahern, for sitting through one more talk of mine. And to all of you, I have loved this. I've watched a lot of your panels at these last 2-day meetings on live stream. And then I've had unique access to your chancellor to get a daily report on what happened. I thank her and Vice Chancellor Greer and all the people here at Queen's for making us all so welcome. In many ways, the students I've seen here and the faculty are a metaphor for the future we hope to see in Northern Ireland, with people of all backgrounds from all around the world living and working together. I must say, I heard the panel in which the representative from the Alliance Party got off, I thought, the best one-liner I'd heard about the purpose of government. They do, after all, hire us to do jobs. So I would ask you to indulge my attempt to downgrade the rhetoric and upgrade the reason. I was in Derry yesterday with Mark Durkin and others, and I'm emotionally spent. But to me, all of this comes down to a pretty simple question. What is the meaning of this peace agreement lasting for 25 years? And what should happen in the next 25 years? I can tell you it's a different place than it was in 1995 when I first came here, but then it was a big deal that Jerry Adams and I shook hands on the street. I mean, you would have thought the pavement was about to crack open. Now people would say, what's the matter with those two snobs? They're not even shaking hands on the street. That's a good thing. But it's lasted 25 years. Most peace agreements fall apart in less than a decade. That's worth remembering. So first, why did it last? It lasted, I think, because the people demanded it. It lasted because the process was really good, and Senator Mitchell did a brilliant job of leading it and negotiating it. And the parties knew what they really needed, which was knowing that they all would have a voice in the future of Northern Ireland, and it mandated cooperation. It forced it in a way that few agreements do. There would be renouncing violence, shared decision-making, shared economic benefits. Prime Minister Ahern gave up the Irish constitutional claim to the counties of the north, and in return the agreement said that this area would have special relationships with the Irish Republic while maintaining its presence in the United Kingdom. And it worked, except when it didn't, when the government went down. But that was a perfectly predictable result. Because whenever you make a big deal like this, and people have to compromise, and everybody wants to compromise, then they wake up the next day and a certain number of people who almost always vote in elections have buyer's remorse. And they say, oh my God, what did I just agree to? So that helps people who are perceived to be stronger and will bargain harder. And it makes the governments more vulnerable. So we went through periods of the government's going down and up and down and up. But now, the government's been down a long time, and a lot of efforts have been made to get it back up. And this Windsor Agreement seems to me, anyway, as an outsider who cares very much, it's about the best deal you could get to split the baby, to allow the benefits of access to the European markets and the necessity of access to the UK market to be reconciled in a way that will permit the best of both worlds. Something that, as far as I can tell, nobody else with this kind of access to the EU has in their domestic market. I don't think there's anything quite like this. So do I hope it will be enough or that it can be tweaked a little bit? I certainly do. Because no matter how good any deal is, how much endurance there is, what really matters is how long it has a hold of people's imagination and trust, and whether the people who are in positions of power and influence will always do what's best for the people. Look, this was a hard deal. In Derry yesterday, we honored the memory and the families of John and Pat Hume and David Trimble. I wish they'd lived to this day. Lord knows they took enough licks. They earned the right to be here. But the good Lord had other plans. They knew, both of them knew, that they would suffer politically for their success. For the reason I said, that buyer's remorse would set in, people would want the toughest deal makers they could get then. And they did it anyway. Or, in Seamus Heaney's memorable words, they walked on air against their better judgment. And if they were here today, both of them would say, I'm glad we did that. Some things are more important than the next election. So we had popular opinion demanding peace. We had a good peace process with vigorous, able, comprehensive, combative leaders, and a great manager in George Mitchell. And we had organized support from important areas. There's a lot been made about the importance of women's groups here, and some of you, including your chancellor, have been on this for a long time, going back to the time of the peace process. But again, there's data that supports that. We know that peace accords are 35% more likely to last at least 15 years if women participate in the process. And now, I expect Jerry Adams to get some sort of international awards for women's rights, as the Sinn Féin has virtually purged itself of male leadership. We're laughing about this, but it's important. The young people are important too. They were always in the right place here, most of them. The kids that introduced me at Mackey's plant way back in 1995, down to the students that I meet in 2023. Not only on campus, it's walking the streets, just talking to people. And that's the last point I want to make. One of the real problems with people like me who used to be something is that we love talking about what we did when we were whatever it was we were, as if, God, we were inspired and we were tough and we were brave and we were brilliant and we hardly ever made a mistake. And oh, if only people today were half as good as we were then, everything would be lovely. That's the biggest load of bull I ever heard in my life. Those of us who were there then should thank God every day that we were lucky enough to be where we were, to have an opportunity when time and circumstances permitted to play a small role in a big lift in the human condition. And that means, but what that means is that all of us should endeavor, and I have tried for more than 22 years now since I left the White House to do this. I've tried in ways large and small. I never tell war stories when I give public speeches unless I am specifically asked to talk about something that happened then as if it were relevant today. Otherwise, I don't do it. I try to live in the present and for the future, and so should we all. And that's why I'd really enjoyed, as much as anything else in this conference, is listening to all of you who have positions now talking about what we should do. But I do think the people that I was privileged to work with, Bertie and Tony and their predecessors, I still remember Albert Reynolds. When I asked him, I called him, I said, think I ought to give Adams a visa? He said, I do. I said, why? He said, blah, blah, blah. He gave me the reasons. And I said, I'll probably get the hell kicked out of me. He said, you will. But you should do it. I was lucky that I had people to talk to from the beginning who talked straight and shot straight. What is the future about? The future is about, now that I think the biggest roadblock to that Brexit posed for Northern Ireland's political and economic future has been dramatically mitigated, is to figure out what the heck else is practically at issue here. Not rhetorically, not ideologically, practically at issue. What else needs to change to protect that day-to-day legitimate pursuit of making a living and deal with it? But this whole deal was never supposed to be an engine of obstruction. The agreement was never supposed to be used to make sure there could be no self-government, to make sure people should give up on it. And we know what the votes were in the last election. We can add them up. There are allocation of seats in the parliamentary body, and it's time to get the show on the road. And I think I want to say one other thing that is purely selfish. I mean, not for me as a citizen, as a father, as a grandfather. I am really worried about how politics has drifted away from serious issues that affect people's daily lives into identity issues which are subject to infinite twisting and are the main purpose of them is to convince people that some of us are more human than others, some of us are more worthy than others, and that our differences matter more than our common humanity. And it's worked out better than I ever thought it could. I'll give it to the people on the other side. They've proved that if you just keep telling people long enough that the, infidels are at the gate and we're about to go to hell in a handbasket and all this stuff that goes on in the United States and lots of other places in the world, it's worked better than I thought it would. But there is a half-life to it, and people do get sick of it. And the basic decent humanity you see in almost everybody, person to person, eventually reasserts itself. The most lyrical description of it I've seen in modern literature is the end of Isabel Wilkerson's great book, Caste, where she's a widow and one of her two children has just died. She's been through hell. And her husband, when he was ill and knew he wasn't going to live long, had meticulously written out instructions for practical things. Who do you call if the plumbing fails? So the water was dripping in her basement, and she looked at her husband's notes, and she called the person. And the guy shows up, and for those of you who don't know her, she's a distinguished black academic at Princeton who's written a lot of wonderful books. And caste compares the caste system in India with the race situation in America. But it's really about modern life. So anyway, but the end of this very serious book is about her trying to get the water leak fixed in her basement. And the guy that shows up to fix a leak has got a MAGA cap on, one of the Trump Make America Great Again hats. And he looks at her, this very refined, elegant black woman, and said, "Where's the lady of the house?" And she says, "That would be me." She explains what happened. He goes down. There's water everywhere. He says, "Well, we got to move these boxes." And at first, he makes no attempt to help her. And then he says, "I think this is not a water leak. I think something happened to your air conditioning. And we can't fix that." And, it's tending toward disaster. And then the guy's looking at all these boxes in the basement. A lot of you have boxes in the basement, don't you? And he sees these old pictures, some of them very old. He said, "Are these your family photos?" And she said, "Yes." He said, "You got to do something about these. These are beautiful pictures, and they could get ruined." And he starts helping her move everything away from the leak. And then he says, "I want to give you somebody you can call about this air conditioning thing. The guy's very honest and won't cheat you. He'll give you good prices." And then the next morning he comes back to her house to make sure that she got the guy, and he's going to fix it. And all of a sudden, he's dealing with this woman who had once symbolized something he thought he had to rail against, as if she were a real live human being. In other words, he's doing what all of you did 25 years ago when you started this, living as a real live human being. When I was a little boy, my mother told me one day, I came home furious, and some thug had done something at school I thought was terrible. She said, Bill, he tried to make you mad, didn't he? I said, he did. He said, he did make you mad, didn't he? I said, yes. She said, anybody whose only goal is to make you mad is not your friend. So you can never stop thinking. You can never stop feeling. So look, I know what I would do. I think if I had some job in the British government or the Irish government or the Northern Ireland political system tomorrow, but that's not nearly as important as you doing it. Guys like me need to get out of town. I mean, they're already doing what they so often do, trying to spew resentment against us for showing up in the first place. Which I think is funny, because I think showing up in the first place helped you get to where we are now. But do you still have problems? Sure. We need more economic growth. We need less inequality. You got some health issues you need to resolve. And you got to have a functioning government to do all that. And there are these other things out there. But I think that's what the British government wants. I think it's what the Irish government wants. And I know it's what the people outside want. And so I thank you for giving me an unforgettable week. And I thank you for caring about all this. And I ask you not to be discouraged. This is human affairs. There are very few permanent victories or defeats in human affairs. All these old, ugly problems are always rearing their heads. And you just have to suck it up and beat it back and deal with it. You'll be fine if you remember what got you here. You are no longer walking on air against your better judgment. If Seamus Heaney were still alive and he were here, he would say, we walked on air against our better judgment. Now you have a hard floor to walk on. For God's sakes, get up and walk. So, this whole thing has been one of the great blessings of my life. And I can't wait to see what you do with it. God bless you. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage on Taoiseach of Ireland, Leo Varadkar.
Díomh go léir, Tá an áisteach bheith anseo nniu an Ollscoil Banrain I Belfast agus gur míle mágat don curú a bheith anseo inniu leabhart libh. Good afternoon, everyone. Secretary Clinton, President Clinton, a very hard act to follow. President von der Leyen, another very hard act to follow. And President Michel, University President Ian Greer, and honoured guests. First of all, my thanks to everyone here in Queen's for what has been a wonderful conference hosted over the past 3 days. I've had the opportunity to follow it from Dublin, to catch it on the news every evening, and it's been really worthwhile. So thank you so much to all the organisers for making this happen. Reflective, diverse, engaging, and challenging. Everything that we'd expect from a university that has produced some of the finest thinkers, leaders, and poets on these islands down through the centuries. The Good Friday Agreement, concluded 25 years ago, challenged our assumptions of what we once thought possible. It gave us a pathway to a better future. And I know from reading back on the history and watching all the documentaries that we've seen on our televisions in recent weeks, that even in the weeks and days leading up to April 10th, many believed that it wouldn't be possible to reach an agreement which all sides could live with. The difficult compromises required were seen as political impossibilities for many of those involved and observing. But vision, leadership, and optimism triumphed in the end. Leaders defied assumptions about what was possible, and they also defied those in their own communities, and in some cases their own parties, who would have preferred to stay mired in conflict than avoid having to make concessions or compromises. They realised that to see their way to a better future, they had to reject the divisions and differences that had kept Northern Ireland in what seemed like an unresolvable impasse for many decades. I know these cannot have been easy decisions to make, and some paid a very high personal or political price. I know that earlier in this conference, there was much reflection on the contribution made by the leaders of 1998, including those who we've sadly lost in the time since. They were the architects of that better future on behalf of all of us, and I pay tribute to them for what they've achieved. And as somebody who was, I think, 18 or 19 years old when the Good Friday Agreement was signed, I've had the privilege of living most of my life in the period since the Good Friday Agreement. And on behalf of my generation, I want to thank those leaders, those architects, from the bottom of my heart. Because I know without the courage and vision of those leaders from right across political traditions on these islands, the last 25 years would have been very different. We certainly would not be marking 25 years of peace here today. We would not have had the prosperity or the investment on the scale that we've experienced, either north or south of the border. I don't think we would have reversed that tide of emigration that went on for generations on our island, north and south. And I definitely do not think we would have made the kind of social progress that we made in Ireland in the last couple of decades. I think few could have imagined the degree to which the Good Friday Agreement would transform relationships at every level across these islands. As we face new challenges, we should not lose sight of this. The architects of the agreement understood the importance of looking towards the future. And speaking on the receipt of his Nobel Prize, David Trimble said, and I quote, "There are hills in Northern Ireland and there are mountains. The dark shadow we seem to see in the distance is not really a mountain ahead, but the shadow of the mountain behind, a shadow from the past thrown forward into our future. We can leave it behind us if we wish." And I think in saying that, Lord Trimble challenged us all. He challenged us to look forward to the future and challenged us to make the active choices required to help us to avoid the mistakes of the past. And the agreement created a space in which people could articulate and work for the future that they wish to see. It recognises that we don't need to have the same aspirations in order to cooperate and work together. The agreement achieved a delicate but vitally important balance on totemic issues, strengthened by core principles, including those of consent and parity of esteem. It recognised the need to encompass the totality of relationships, those within Northern Ireland, North-South, and between Britain and Ireland. And whatever may change in the next few years or decades, I don't think that will change. We'll still have to make sure we get it right in terms of those three crucial relationships. It also recognised that people could be British or Irish or both and be accepted as such. And I think that was crucial. And there is an increasingly growing middle ground in Northern Ireland willing to do so. And I believe that will be significant into the future. The principle of consent is vital to the agreement's success. For nationalists, it lays out a democratic pathway by which a united Ireland can be achieved. For unionists, it recognises that Northern Ireland is an integral part of the United Kingdom and will remain the case unless and until the majority of people in Northern Ireland want that to change, and indeed a majority in the South too. In recognition of these delicate balances, in the Republic we went directly to the people with a referendum to change our constitution to take account of that principle of consent. With over 90% of people voting yes in the Republic and over 70% of people voting yes here in the North, we had clear democratic consent for an agreed way forward on the island, perhaps for the first time in centuries. And here in Belfast today, I want to rededicate the Irish government to continue to work with all of the parties in Northern Ireland and with our partners in London to drive the process forward to the benefit of everyone on our islands. And so, both governments have an ongoing obligation to honour and implement the agreement. And that's why I'm so pleased to be here with Prime Minister Sunak today, having a meeting later on here in Belfast. The peace process, I believe, has always been at its strongest when the two governments have worked hand in hand. And Northern Ireland works best when the two governments work together with an agreed strategy. A partnership approach, often based on difficult decisions, has been decisive in driving things forward at crucial points in the past. The 1985 Anglo-Irish Agreement, signed by Margaret Thatcher and Gareth Fitzgerald, the Downing Street Declaration, agreed by Albert Reynolds and John Major, and the Good Friday Agreement itself, and all the milestones that had followed, were only possible because of the joint approach from the two governments. And to quote the Prime Minister, the agreement was born of partnership together. And I believe we can make the Good Friday Agreement fulfil its promise for reconciliation and shared achievement. Colleagues, I'm particularly delighted that so many of our international friends are here with us today. While the agreement belongs first and foremost to the people of Britain and Ireland, it was built with the help of our partners from around the world. And we're so grateful that so many people in other parts of the world have an ongoing, deep and meaningful interest in what happens in Ireland. It's impossible to list all of the individuals that made their mark on our peace process, and I'm not going to try to do so. But if you just think of some of the countries that have made a contribution, the United States, South Africa, Finland, Canada, and indeed the countries of the European Union, just hearing that list evokes a roll call of individuals to whom we owe our deep appreciation. So I'm grateful to all of you, those with us and those who travel the journey of peace with us, for your support over the decades. It's not simply a matter of history. You've heard directly from President von der Leyen and President Michel earlier of their ongoing commitment to the Good Friday Belfast Agreement and to Northern Ireland. And last week, President Biden spoke powerfully in this place of his and the United States' ongoing commitment to peace and reconciliation on this island. And for that, we are truly grateful. And I know Special Envoy Kennedy's presence here with us today, and indeed for many days, is further concrete proof of this, a reminder of the opportunities that lie ahead if we reach together. The peace process has given us the opportunity to unlock these possibilities and to unlock new opportunities and new prosperity. And because of the peace and stability brought about by the agreement, now parts of all of our futures are being built here in Northern Ireland. Companies from around the world have come to Northern Ireland, creating jobs and prosperity. Indigenous enterprises flourished, and I believe that there is much better yet to come. A prosperous Northern Ireland benefits us all. The all-island economy has so much potential to drive growth to the advantage of everyone in Britain and Ireland. And I believe that the Irish government's Shared Island Initiative can play an even greater role, investing in the future of this island and here in the north, resolving issues that matter to people the most, and finding better ways to work together and understand one another. And this is something I'm very serious about. So we'll continue to engage with all communities and traditions on the island to build a vision for our shared future in an inclusive, constructive approach underpinned by the principles of the agreement. We firmly hope that the Windsor Framework will play an essential role in securing additional investment in Northern Ireland, as well as offering real economic benefits to communities across Northern Ireland. The framework has been welcomed by the business community, which has expressed a desire to move forward and take advantage of the opportunities and the certainty that it offers. A prosperous Northern Ireland is a place where people will want to live in, will want to make work, a place where young people will stay and return to. It's interesting to know that increasingly we see people from all parts of the world choosing to live here in Northern Ireland. The last census tells us that 124,000 people now living in the north were not born in either Ireland or Britain. That's extraordinary, and it's a positive and interesting thing in my view. It's also a testament to how far we've come, that so many people from other parts of Europe, and indeed from beyond Europe, have chosen to make Northern Ireland their home. But continued prosperity requires a functioning government, and public services need to be reformed, improved, and invested in. And that's why I believe the people of Northern Ireland deserve a functioning Executive, Assembly, and North-South Ministerial Council, and we'll work. And so the challenges of today require Northern Ireland's leaders to make the decisions that affect the communities on the ground. In conclusion, I believe that the Good Friday Agreement, above all, was about defying historical expectations. And we need that kind of leadership still. Speaking after the agreement was concluded, John Hume said, and I quote, "Unionists and nationalists have at last taken the future in their hands. They've seized control of their history rather than letting history hold them in thrall. It's incumbent on Northern Ireland's political leaders today to take the initiative, to see past the shadow of the mountain behind, to seize control of their history, to seize control of their destiny, and to lead people into a better future. And we, as co-guarantors of the agreement, will be here to help every step of the way." Thank you very much.
Please welcome to the stage the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the Right Honourable Rishi Sunak.
Good afternoon. The Belfast Good Friday Agreement will always be remembered as one of the most extraordinary political achievements of our lifetimes. Because step by step, faltering at first, people on all sides began to do things that were once unthinkable in the search for peace. But you don't need me to tell you that, because many of you in this room created it. It's humbling to be with you today, and with the people of Northern Ireland, who have endured so much. After 3 long decades where violence and terror were part of everyday life, a generation has grown up in a place that is vastly more peaceful, more prosperous, and more at ease with itself. Now, of course, we meet here today in circumstances that are far from perfect. But my argument today is this: the Belfast Good Friday Agreement remains the best and only foundation for peace and prosperity. And if we can take inspiration and instruction from the way peace was achieved 25 years ago, we can fulfill the true promise enshrined in that agreement. The promise of stable, devolved government, a prosperous economy, and a more united society. That's the future for Northern Ireland we must build. Now, to do that, we must first ask why. Why did peace talks succeed in 1998 when so many had failed before? Now, I believe that's because people on all sides showed courage, imagination, and perseverance. First, those who worked for peace had the personal courage to keep going in spite of daily threats to them and their families, and the political courage to take risks in pursuit of a higher goal. John Hume, over his entire career, never relented in his insistence on non-violence. David Trimble took enormous risks to do what he thought was right for the Union, and they were rightly honoured as the preeminent architects of peace with a joint Nobel Peace Prize. Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness persuaded Republicans to join a constitutional power-sharing assembly. And encouraged by the intensive efforts of Mo Mowlam, the leaders of loyalism also lent their weight behind the deal. Female leaders from the Women for Peace and the Women's Coalition worked so hard for peace. And Bertie Ahern showed the wisdom and statecraft to see the historic opportunity. At a critical moment, he recognized unionist concerns over the proposed North-South arrangements and stepped back. Trimble himself, in his last public appearance at this university, just weeks before he passed away, embraced his old counterpart and thanked Bertie for giving him the space to act. These acts of courage were more powerful than 1,000 bombs and bullets, because there is nothing glamorous about violence. There is nothing glorious about terror. Squalid acts are always justified with some false dream about what they will achieve. But they have never worked, and they never will. Instead, let us glorify moderation, romanticize respect, and make heroes of those with the courage to reject absolutes, not kill for them. Now, second, making peace required leaps of imagination to conceive of a system for power sharing between traditions, to design an agreement with 3 strands of equal importance, to enshrine the principle of consent so that Northern Ireland remains a part of the United Kingdom for as long as its people wish, while protecting the aspirations of those who seek a different future through peaceful means. And for the first time, the people of North and South were both given the opportunity to support the deal, and they did so in overwhelming majorities. And let us never forget the crucial work after 1998 to build a broader consensus, helped by the leadership of Dr. Ian Paisley. And third, the peace took extraordinary perseverance. In the aftermath of the Shankill bomb and Greysteel massacre in 1993, many thought the peace process was over. But just 2 months later, John Major and Albert Reynolds delivered the Downing Street Declaration. George Mitchell persuaded all parties to sign up to the principles of democracy and non-violence, without which the talks could not have begun. And in the difficult final hours, President Clinton's timely interventions helped get the deal done. And whenever people walked away, Tony Blair sought to bring them back, always committed, always attuned to the concerns of all parts of the community. Together with Bertie Ahern, he showed us what's possible when the UK and Irish governments work together, a partnership I know will continue alongside my friend, Leo Varadkar. And in the spirit of perseverance, it's also fitting to recognise the contribution of the security forces. Now, like my predecessors, I acknowledge that at times they made mistakes. But we must also recognise their bravery, suffering, and sacrifice, and that of the police. Without their courageous service, there would have been no peace process at all. They created the conditions that ultimately allowed their own presence on the streets to be reduced or entirely withdrawn. So, courage, imagination, and perseverance. Those qualities brought an imperfect but enduring peace to a place taught to believe no such peace was possible. So to all those who led us to that peace, including those in this hall and those no longer with us, let us take this moment to say to all of you, thank you. Now, for those of us like me who inherit this extraordinary, even intimidating legacy, our challenge today is to fulfill the promise of the work that you began. To honour your legacy, we need to create a more stable, devolved government in Northern Ireland. And that means getting the institutions up and running. Now, I believe there are two tasks. First, to remove the biggest block to the institutions returning, and that's why, when I came into office, I made it a priority to fix the Northern Ireland Protocol. And we were deeply conscious of the lessons of history as we did so. That's why our aims were to balance and respect the aspirations of all parts of the community, protect the relationships between East and West as much as North and South, and persist through careful, detailed negotiation. And I pay tribute to Ursula von der Leyen, who I'm so pleased to see here today. The Windsor Framework is a breakthrough moment. It solves practical problems and crucially strengthens Northern Ireland's place in our union and our UK internal market. It gives the Assembly significant new powers ready for when it sits again, and I am confident we can build broad support for it across all communities. So I share people's frustrations that the institutions are not back up and running. But that points to our second task. We must keep working to persuade all parts of the community that returning to the institutions is the best path. And we will do that. We will talk, we will listen, we will try to persuade, and we will not give up. And I want to speak directly for a moment to the representatives of unionism, who include many diverse voices and whose concerns with the protocol we are focused on addressing. I urge you to work with us to get Stormont up and running again. That's the right thing to do in its own terms, and I'm convinced it's also the right thing to do for our union. Now, I'm a proud unionist. We passionately believe that Northern Ireland is stronger within the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom is stronger with Northern Ireland within it. but we must also build support beyond those of us who already identify as unionists. To do that, we have to show that devolved government within the United Kingdom works for Northern Ireland. The fact that the institutions have been down for 9 of the last 25 years should be a source of profound concern. Over the long term, that will not bolster the cause of unionism. I believe that deeply. So we need to get the institutions up and running and keep them up and running. And let me also say to those who would seek to reform the institutions right now, I understand your frustrations, but history reminds us that nothing in Northern Ireland has ever been achieved by trying to get around one community or another. So any conversation about reform can only begin once the institutions are up and running again, and if it attracts widespread consent. The Belfast Good Friday Agreement left us an extraordinary and precious legacy. When we look back in 25 years from now, surely we should aspire for our legacy to be nothing less than this, that the institutions have been up and running for every single year. Because our focus must be on the future. Getting the institutions back up and running is our most pressing challenge to honour your legacy. But that's only the beginning. Together we must fulfil the true promise of the 1998 agreement. That future enshrined in the very words of the text, of sustained economic growth and where we tackle the problems of a divided society. I will give everything to help deliver that vision. Because I talked earlier about learning the lessons from history. One thing I took from George Mitchell is the idea that the agreement itself is only 20% of the task. The rest is delivery. Once the agreement was done, people asked of Tony Blair, would he walk away? He didn't, and neither will I. Because there is work to be done. So let me tell you what I'm going to do. First, economic growth. Progress has been remarkable. In April 1998, Northern Ireland had the highest unemployment rate in the United Kingdom. Today, it's the second lowest. But we need to do more. In 25 years, when we look back, I want to see that Northern Ireland has changed. From an economy too reliant on the public sector, to a thriving, dynamic economy built around the power and innovation of private enterprise. Now, I talk a lot about the idea of levelling up, about making sure young people can feel that they can fulfill their dreams and aspirations in the place they call home. That idea has particular resonance here in Northern Ireland. And we won't achieve it without a cascade of new investment to create jobs and opportunity. Now, that journey has already begun. Last week, President Biden came and told the world to invest here. Now, he didn't say that out of sentimentality. He said it because he can see the opportunity for American businesses and because of the enormous potential of this place. The potential of the people, resilient, ingenious, determined. The potential of your businesses, with world-class strengths in cyber, life sciences, financial services, and the creative industries, and one of Europe's most thriving startup scenes. I know that journey to prosperity won't be easy, and we aren't there yet, but this is my commitment to you. I will use the full force and power of the UK government to help you make one of this the best places in the world to start and grow a business, create jobs, train and learn new skills, and attract investment. And just as we want to look back on a more prosperous, dynamic economy, so in 25 years, I also want us to look back on a more integrated and contented society. Of course, we cannot simply wish away those social realities that have been present for decades. The tragic loss of Lyra McKee and the attack on DCI John Caldwell remind us how far we still have to go. But people are already voting with their feet in the choices they make for their children's education and in their social and sporting lives. A growing body of the electorate does not define themselves solely as unionist or nationalist, British or Irish. A growing portion of people sample life in different parts of these islands but still return. And a growing number of local communities are signalling that their patience with thuggery is over. But there's yet more to do. In 25 years, should not the poisonous grip of the paramilitaries, those gangsters and drug dealers who wrap themselves in the fake cloak of legitimacy, be broken once and for all? In 25 years, should not a fragment of a peace wall be nothing more than a stop on the tourist trail? And in 25 years, should integrated education not be the norm rather than the exception? Of course, we won't build that better future overnight, and it won't always be easy. But every time I visit Northern Ireland, I feel more optimistic and hopeful. Because to paraphrase the late David Trimble, there may be hills ahead of us, but there are mountains behind. And I want to close by reflecting on an extraordinary story. Just weeks before the agreement, two lifelong friends, Damien Traynor and Philip Allen, were murdered at Points Pass. One was a Protestant, the other Catholic. Now, the people who murdered them may have hoped to sow chaos and division and derail the peace talks. They failed, because the story of this remarkable friendship inspired one of the most decisive breakthroughs of the whole peace process: the agreement to share power between equal first and deputy first ministers in a co-premiership with one from each community. As Mark Durkan, the SDLP's lead negotiator, said at the time, the stories of Philip and Damien's special friendship could be a parable for the sort of society that we might create if we could reach agreement. And he was right. That is the promise of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And together we can and we must fulfill it. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage President and Vice-Chancellor of Queen's University Belfast, Professor Ian Greer.
The last 3 days have been simply inspiring and frankly highly emotional. It's been fantastic to hear not only so many different perspectives on the opportunities that we have here in Northern Ireland, but also the impact that we have on the global stage. This afternoon we've had the chance to hear from so many leaders, all of whom inspired us greatly. Their very participation emphasised the importance that we have here in Northern Ireland to them and their communities. Over the